I remember that night clearly. A hot July night in Chicago, the air stifling and choking. But inside the Gilded Spoon, everything was cool and elegant, with soft jazz music playing in the air. The golden light from crystal chandeliers glinted off silver cutlery and sparkling red wine glasses. The crowd of guests in expensive clothes chatted animatedly, laughter ringing out in intervals, mingling with the clink of wine glasses. This was the 10th wedding anniversary of my sister Sophia and her husband Daniel. An event that should have been filled with joy. But for me, Emma Larson, it was a cacophony of awkwardness, tension, and buried painful memories. I sat in a corner of the restaurant, trying to blend in with the crowd, but feeling like an outsider. At 34, I was a prominent civil court judge in Chicago, with a solid career and an independent life built on hard work. But in the eyes of my family, especially Sophia, I was nothing more than a shadow, a lonely judge who understood nothing about family affection. Sophia, 31, radiant and charismatic in a sparkling evening gown, was always the center of attention. She moved through the tables, her smile charming, her voice loud, occasionally glancing at me with challenging eyes and a hint of gloating. Her husband, Daniel, a talented criminal lawyer, was more composed. He was tall, with neatly combed black hair and sharp eyes that seemed to observe everything carefully. I sipped my wine, trying to keep my face calm, but every polite greeting from the guests only made me feel more and more out of place. My family, especially Sophia, always had a way of making me feel like I didn't belong here, as if my presence was forced. My parents sat at the main table, laughing and chatting happily with the guests, but their eyes rarely turned towards me. They were proud of Sophia, of her perfect marriage to Daniel, of the lavish life she enjoyed. And me? I was just Emma, the dry older sister, always busy with lawsuits and never understood the joy of family. The clinking of wine glasses rang out, pulling me out of my thoughts. Daniel stood up, raised his glass, and prepared to speak. The atmosphere in the restaurant fell. All eyes turned to him. He smiled, his deep voice resounding, thanking everyone for coming to celebrate. But then Sophia, with a faint smile on her lips, suddenly interrupted. She stood up, raised her glass. Her eyes swept over me before speaking, sweet but cold. Before Daniel continues, I want to send a special wish to my sister Emma. Congratulations, lonely judge. Still haven't found someone to share your life with? You probably don't understand what it feels like to love your family, do you? Sophia's words were like a needle that stabbed straight into my heart. The whole restaurant was silent, not a sound, except for the faint jazz music playing in the distance. All eyes were on me, as if I were a cornered animal. I could feel the curiosity, the pity, and the amusement of those waiting to see how I would react. I was used to Sophia's harsh words, the ones that were wrapped in humor, but were actually sharp stabs. But this time, there was something different. There was something in the air, a tension that I couldn't quite place. I tried to keep my face calm, my lips pressed tightly together, my hands gripping the glass tightly. I didn't want to give Sophia the pleasure of seeing me collapse. But at that moment, Daniel, who had always been calm and reserved, did something that stunned me. He slammed the glass down on the table, the sound of the glass clinking loudly, breaking the suffocating silence. His eyes, sharp and cold, looked straight at me. I felt as if I was being stripped bare by that gaze, as if he had seen through every secret I was trying to hide. Emma? Daniel's voice rang out, not loud, but loud enough for everyone to hear. It's time for you to tell everyone about the truth from 6 years ago. Or do you want me to do it for you? His words were like a time bomb, shattering the artificial atmosphere of the party. My heart pounded. My chest felt tight. All the memories of Mia, of my silent sacrifice, of the pain of loss, came rushing back like a tidal wave. Sophia turned pale, her eyes looking at Daniel in panic, then turned to me as if begging me to keep quiet. My parents, sitting at the main table, looked at us in confusion, not understanding what was happening. The other guests whispered, their eyes filled with curiosity and confusion. The truth. 6 years ago, just one sentence from Daniel had brought it all back. Mia, the little girl with the big, scared eyes, had been the light of my life, The secret that I had buried, not because I wanted to, but because I thought it was the only way to protect my family, to protect Sophia. But now, standing before Daniel's sharp gaze and the heavy silence of the whole room, I knew this moment had come. I could no longer run away. I was faced with a stark choice. Should I continue to remain silent, to protect Sophia, who had continually belittled and hurt me, or reveal the painful truth that had shaped my life, starting a journey to seek justice not only for myself, but also for Mia, the person I loved more than life itself? I looked at Daniel, his eyes no longer those of an estranged brother-in-law. There was anticipation, challenge, but also encouragement. He knew. Somehow he knew. I took a deep breath, feeling a surge of strength in my chest. My hands were shaking, but the voice in my head was more determined than ever. This anniversary party would no longer be a show of false happiness. It would be the beginning of truth, of justice, and of a journey from which I could not retreat. I stood up, my eyes scanning the room. Sophia, her face pale, shook her head slightly, as if to stop me, but I had made up my mind. "I will tell you," I said, my voice calm but firm. The room fell silent, save for the pounding of my heart. I knew that, from this moment on, everything would change forever. I left the Gilded Spoon, my mind still echoing Daniel's sharp words and Sophia's panicked eyes. Chicago at night was bathed in flickering lights, but I had no mind to look. I drove back to my apartment downtown, a minimalist space with white walls and neat furniture, where I always found peace in the storm of life. I sat down in my familiar armchair, turned off the lights, and let the darkness envelop me. In the quiet of the night, childhood memories flooded back, clear and sharp like an old film. The suburban Chicago bungalow where Sophia and I grew up, where my first scars were formed, comes to mind. It was a cozy house, with a crackling fireplace in the winter and a small garden full of daisies in the summer. But behind that idyllic exterior was an inequality that I recognized early on, even as a child. I always tried to be the perfect child, believing that if I excelled, my parents would love me the way they loved Sophia. I studied day and night, got top grades, and participated in every extracurricular activity, from choir to debate club, all to get a nod of approval or a look of pride from my parents. But what I received was often indifference, a bland compliment, or worse, comparisons to Sophia. My younger sister, Sophia, is a complete contrast. Ever since she was a child, she has been a whirlwind of rebellion, breaking all the rules without hesitation. She skipped school, threw noisy parties when her parents were away, and always sought attention with reckless actions. But the strange thing is, no matter what she did, Sophia always seemed to be forgiven. With just an angelic smile, a pout, or a few sweet apologies, my parents were ready to overlook all mistakes. I still remember clearly one time, when Sophia was 15, she drove her father's car without a license, causing a minor collision. My parents, instead of scolding her, just gently reminded her to be more careful next time. Meanwhile, if I accidentally broke a glass, I would have to listen to a long lecture about being careful and responsible. That bias was etched into my mind like a scar that never healed. I felt abandoned, as if my parents' love for me was always conditional, always placed in the shadow of Sophia's brilliance. I tried twice, 3 times harder to prove myself, but the harder I tried, the more I realized that to my parents, I was never enough. I remember one time when I won a full scholarship to a prestigious high school. My parents just nodded and said, "Good job, Emma, but don't get cocky." Meanwhile, when Sophia won a beauty pageant at school, they threw a party to celebrate. The injustice made my heart, even though I was young, ache. But despite the injustice, I always stood up for Sophia. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because I wanted to preserve the fragile peace in the family, or because I still hoped that one day she would appreciate me. I remember one time when Sophia was 16, she was detained by the police for causing trouble at a party. I lied to my parents, took the blame for her, saying that I was the one who asked her to go. I was grounded for 2 weeks, and Sophia just promised to be better, and everything was forgiven. At times like that, I told myself that I did it for the sake of sisterhood, for the sake of family. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. The most painful memory and the source of my silent resentment occurred when I was 22. I had just graduated from college with honors and had been offered an internship at a prestigious New York law firm, a stepping stone to my dream of becoming a lawyer. I saw my future, a bright path. But then, Sophia, out of what I believe was pure jealousy, spread a rumor that I had cheated on a school exam. The rumor was completely unfounded. I had never done anything unethical in my studies. The school investigated and cleared me, but the damage was done. The New York law firm, upon hearing the rumor, withdrew the internship offer without explanation. The door to my future slammed shut because of Sophia's lie. The shock of that moment sent me spiraling into a deep abyss. I had lost the greatest opportunity of my life and had to start over with less prestigious options in a city other than New York. The pain came not only from the loss, but also from the betrayal of my own sister. I realized that Sophia was not only a stubborn sister, but also capable of causing deep, cruel, and heartless hurt. But instead of breaking me, the pain became a fire inside me. It pushed me to work harder, more determined to prove that I did not need anyone's approval, not even my family's. In the darkness of my apartment, those memories made my heart clench. I realized how much I had sacrificed time, effort, opportunity for a false sense of security. I had always protected Sophia, always put my family before myself, but the price I paid was scars that would never heal. The seeds of justice began to sprout in my mind, not of brutal revenge, but of a desire to reclaim what was mine. The conflict between my responsibility as a sister and my feelings of betrayal grew, like a storm waiting to explode. I looked out the window, the city lights flickering in the night. I didn't know what I would do next, but I knew that one day the truth would have to come out. And when that day came, I would no longer be the resigned sister. Losing my internship opportunity in New York because of Sophia's malicious rumors was a big blow, but it did not knock me down. Instead, it was like a burning fire, burning away all my hesitation and fueling my will to rise up. I told myself that if I could not walk on the flowery path, I would open a new path for myself. Even though it was bumpy, it would be my own. The pain of betrayal did not knock me down, but became the motivation for me to prove my own worth without needing the recognition of my family, especially Sophia. I threw myself into my studies with an almost obsessive focus. To pay for law school and to pay for living expenses in Chicago, I worked all sorts of part-time jobs, waiting tables at a small coffee shop, working as a research assistant for a law professor, even transcribing court transcripts late at night. There were days when I slept only 3 hours, my eyes stinging from lack of sleep, my body so tired I wanted to collapse. But every time I felt exhausted, the image of Sophia's smirk or my parents' disappointed eyes would appear, urging me to get up. I wanted to prove that I wasn't the failure they thought I was, that I could stand on my own. I studied day and night, studying each case and each law as if it were my own breath. I participated in mock trials, arguing with sharpness and burning passion. Every step I reminded myself that this was not just a journey to become a lawyer, but also a journey to regain myself. At the age of 30, after many years of hard work, I achieved what many people only dream of, becoming one of the youngest civil court judges in Chicago. I specialize in cases related to the rights and protection of children, a field I did not choose by chance. After what I experienced in my family, I wanted to become a protector of vulnerable children, young souls who are easily damaged by the indifference of adults. I wanted to make sure that no child would have to suffer the feeling of abandonment that I had experienced. One case in particular sticks in my mind. It was a custody battle involving a 7-year-old girl named Lily, who had been abandoned by both her parents. As I entered the courtroom, I saw Lily sitting huddled, her eyes wide with fear, a look that reminded me of my own as a child. Throughout the trial, I faced sharp attorneys, conflicting testimony, and pressure from the system to make a quick decision. But I didn't rush. I took my time listening, carefully studying the case and working with social workers to find the best solution for Lily. Ultimately, I helped her find a loving foster family where she could grow up safe and happy. When Lily looked back at me one last time before leaving the courtroom, her eyes sparkled with hope. At that moment, I knew I had chosen the right path. But despite my success, Sophia never stopped mocking me. She called me a lonely judge, a busybody with no personal life. Every time I tried to share about my work, about the children I helped, Sophia would sneer and say I was wasting my time. "You're always worrying about other people's business. When will you ever worry about yourself?" She would say. Her tone full of sarcasm, I tried to ignore it, but every word she said was like a knife, bringing back old wounds. One particularly painful memory was a family gathering a few years ago. I had just solved a complicated child abuse case, helping a young boy escape from a dangerous environment and find a new home. I felt proud and wanted to share my joy with my parents. But as I finished telling her, Sophia burst out laughing, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Oh, my sister is always busy with small cases. My Daniel handles much bigger cases and makes a lot of money. You are a second-rate lawyer, only concerned with small matters." Her words were like a bucket of cold water thrown in my face. I looked at my parents, hoping they would say something in my defense, but my mother just avoided my eyes, and my father remained silent, as if agreeing with Sophia. Their silence was more painful than her sarcasm. Those taunts did not break me, but instead they became fuel for my determination. I learned to turn pain into strength and contempt into motivation to move forward. I became more determined in my work, and every decision I made was an affirmation of my worth. I did not need my family's recognition to know who I was. Every child I helped, every case I solved fairly, was proof that I had overcome the shadow of the past. Yet deep down, I kept dark secrets about Sophia. I knew about her drug addiction, about the times she got into trouble, and I had to cover for her. I kept quiet, not because she deserved it, but because I wanted to protect the fragile family harmony. But the contrast between my professional success and the feeling of being looked down upon by my family created an irreconcilable internal conflict. In court, I was a strong, fair judge, but in front of my family, I was as vulnerable as a child. I wondered, how much longer could I keep this secret? And was it worth continuing to make such sacrifices? Every night, when I return to my quiet apartment, I sit in the dark and think about the path I have taken. I have fought to become who I am today, but the price is loneliness and scars that will never heal. I know that one day, everything will come crashing down. And when that day comes, I will have to face not only Sophia, but myself. 6 years ago, a midnight phone call changed my life forever, plunging me into a secret I never thought I would have to bear. The phone rang loudly in the quiet night, tearing my sleep apart. I woke up with a start, my heart pounding, my hands shaking as I reached for the phone on my nightstand. The screen lit up, displaying Sophia's name. Her voice on the other end of the line was shaky, urgent, a far cry from her usual arrogance. "Emma, can you come right away? I need you. Please." There was no explanation, just sobs and desperation in her voice. Despite our strained relationship, my sisterly instincts kept me from leaving her alone. I quickly put on my coat, grabbed my car keys, and headed out into the cold Chicago night. Sophia gave me an address in a rundown slum I had never been to. As I drove through the dark, dimly lit streets, I felt a sense of unease creeping in. The dilapidated buildings, the trash-filled alleys, and the stench made me shiver. I pulled up in front of an old apartment building, the rusted staircase creaking under my feet. As I pushed open the door to the apartment Sophia had directed me to, a musty, putrid smell hit me. A dim light from a bare bulb illuminated the cluttered room, with its scattered furniture and cigarette butts strewn across the floor. The sight stunned me. Sophia sat huddled in the corner of the room, her hair disheveled, her eyes sunken, her face horribly haggard. She was no longer the radiant, elegant Sophia I had seen at lavish parties. There were bruises on her arms, clear signs of abuse. But what made my heart stop was the sight of a tiny girl, about 3 years old, huddled in the corner across the room. Her big round eyes looked at me, frightened and lost, like a trapped fawn. She was wearing a thin shirt, her bare feet trembling on the cold floor. I knelt down trying to say something, but my throat was choked. "It's Mia," Sophia whispered, her voice hoarse, as if she were struggling to form the words. "She is my daughter. I can't take care of her anymore." I was stunned, my mind spinning. Mia was Sophia's daughter? a secret that no one in the family knew, not even my parents. Sophia, in a panic, told me that she had gotten into drugs, that she had tried to quit but failed, that the man she loved had abandoned her and left her with bruises. She begged me to take Mia, promising to go to rehab and start her life over. I promise, Emma. Please save Mia. I'll come back for her when I'm stable. My mind screamed at me to say no. My life was stable, my career was on the rise, and I had no plans to become a mother. I was a judge, a person who lived by schedules and principles, not someone who was ready to welcome a child into my life. But when I looked into Mia's big, round eyes, those scared, innocent eyes, my heart sank. I couldn't leave her. I took Mia to my apartment and began a journey I had never prepared for. Mia's arrival turned my life upside down. From an independent woman accustomed only to court and paperwork, I suddenly became an unwilling mother. The first few nights, Mia cried incessantly, calling for her mother in her sleep. I stayed up all night, comforting her, learning how to change diapers, prepare formula, and read children's books I never thought I would pick up. I had to rearrange my schedule, turn down important conferences, and cancel promising job offers to make time for Mia. There were days when I was exhausted, wondering if I was doing the right thing. But every time I saw Mia smile, even if it was just a small smile, I knew I couldn't go back. Mia gradually became the light of my life. She was innocent, lovable, with her silly questions and warm hugs. I began to love her, not just as an aunt, but as a mother. That love was so deep, unconditional, and strong that I couldn't imagine my life without Mia. I bought her toys, took her to the park, and told her fairy tales every night. Those moments filled a void in my heart that I didn't know existed. But alongside the joy, my inner conflict grew. The responsibility of taking care of Mia clashed with the career I had poured so much effort into. I turned down promotions and missed out on big projects just to ensure Mia had a stable life. There were nights when Mia was fast asleep and I sat alone wondering if I was sacrificing too much. But then, looking at her angelic face, I knew I had no regrets. Mia deserved everything I did. I also had to deal with questions about Sophia. I didn't know if she would actually go to rehab as she promised, or if she would come back to claim Mia. Every time I thought about giving Mia back to Sophia, my heart clenched. I wanted to believe that Sophia would change, that she would become a good mother, but deep down, I knew that was a false hope. I had seen her live an irresponsible life since she was a child, and I feared that Mia would not be safe if she returned to her biological mother. I started planning for Mia's future. I researched good preschools, signed her up for art classes she loved, and even started saving for her education fund. I wanted Mia to have the life I never had, a loving, secure childhood. But deep down, I was always afraid of Sophia's return. I knew that, legally, I had no right to keep Mia forever. I was just an aunt, not a mother, and that made me live in a nameless anxiety. Every night as I held Mia close to me, I whispered to her that I would always be there, that I would always protect her. But deep down, I knew that this journey would not be easy. I had accepted Mia, accepted this new life, and was ready to face any challenge. But I did not know that the biggest challenge was still waiting for me ahead, and it would come sooner than I thought. 9 months after I adopted Mia, when our lives were starting to settle into a routine, something happened that tore apart the peace I had worked so hard to build. Sophia returned. She showed up at my apartment door one rainy afternoon without warning. The knocking on the door made my heart pound, and when I opened it, I saw Sophia standing there, her hair wet but her face bright, a far cry from the haggard image she had been 9 months ago. With her was a tall, well-dressed stranger with a confident smile. "Emma, I'm home," Sophia said brightly, then hugged me as if nothing had happened. The man introduced himself as Ethan, a successful businessman, and his eyes were full of appraisal. I invited them in, trying to appear calm, but inside I was a storm of emotions. Mia was playing with a puzzle on the floor, looking up at her mother with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Sophia knelt down, holding Mia, but she nestled against me, her little hands clutching my shirt. Sophia smiled awkwardly, but I could see the slight discomfort in her eyes. I've kicked my addiction, sis, Sophia said, her voice full of pride. I'm stable now. I want to bring Mia back to live with me and Ethan. Her words were like a knife stabbing into my heart. I looked at Mia, then at Sophia, searching for a sign of sincerity, but all I saw was a perfect facade. I sensed an underlying instability in Sophia. Despite her refreshing appearance, her evasive gaze and the way she spoke so quickly made me suspicious. Ethan, though polite, did not give off a sense of trust. He talked about his plans to build a happy family for Mia, but his words sounded like a prepared speech. I tried to stay calm, but inside I was fighting a fierce battle. My mind told me that I couldn't hand Mia over to Sophia, not when she was still so unstable. But my heart ached at the thought of separating them. I had cared for Mia like my own child, but legally I had no right to keep her. Sophia, please let Mia stay with me for a while, I said, trying to keep my voice light. She needs time to get used to you. You can visit Mia often, even stay here for a while to be close to her. I offered everything from temporary living together to Sophia attending family counseling, but Sophia shook her head, her eyes hard. No, Emma. Mia is your child. You can take her away whenever you want. I have no right to keep her. Her voice was sharp, without a trace of the pleading she had felt 9 months ago. I looked at Mia, still pressed against me, her eyes wide and filled with tears. I tried to persuade her further, but Sophia wouldn't listen. She stood up, took Mia's hand, and dragged her to the door. Mia struggled, sobbing, calling Auntie Emma, and in desperation. I ran after her, trying to hug Mia one last time, but Ethan stood in front of me, his eyes cold. You should let them go, he said, his voice flat. Sophia pulled Mia into the car, and before I could do anything, the car sped away, leaving me standing silently in the cold rain. I walked back into the apartment, feeling empty. The room was now suffocatingly silent. No more Mia's innocent laughter, no more innocent questions or warm hugs. I collapsed on the floor, hugging Mia's favorite teddy bear, tears streaming down my face. The pain of losing Mia was deeper than any pain I had ever experienced. She was not just my niece. She had become an indispensable part of my life. I had turned down promotions, missed out on big projects, just to spend time with her. And now it all seemed to disappear. But the worst was yet to come. Just a few weeks later, I discovered that Sophia and Ethan had moved to Los Angeles, completely cutting off contact. Sophia's phone was locked, her emails were unanswered, and no one in the family knew where they had gone. I called, wrote, even contacted Sophia's friends, but all in vain. Sophia had disappeared, taking Mia with her, leaving me in despair. I didn't know how Mia was doing, if she was safe. Every night I lay awake, picturing Mia's little face, wondering if she was crying, if she missed me. The pain did not completely break me, but instead it turned into a smoldering fire. I realized that I had trusted Sophia too much, hoped that she would change, but she betrayed my trust once again. The pain of losing Mia became the motivation for me to continue fighting. I returned to work with a clearer mission: to protect abandoned children, forgotten by the system. Every case I handled, I thought of Mia, thought of her frightened eyes in the shabby apartment. I promised myself that I would not let any child suffer the same fate as Mia. There was an irreconcilable conflict in my heart. I loved Mia more than life itself, but I had failed to protect her. I blamed myself for not doing more, for not trying to save Mia. But at the same time, I still held out hope that Sophia would change, that she would become a good mother. It was a fragile hope, but it was the only thing that kept me from completely collapsing. I started searching for information about Mia, contacting child protection agencies, but all my efforts were met with dead ends. I knew this journey would not be easy, but I could not give up. Mia was the reason I woke up every morning, the fire that kept me fighting. I swore to myself that one day I would find her again. And when that day came, I would not let anyone, not even Sophia, hurt Mia again. Back at the Gilded Spoon, I stood on the edge between silence and explosion, my heart pounding like it was about to burst out of my chest. Daniel's sharp words still echoed in my head, and Sophia's panicked eyes were like a sharp knife. I tried to keep a calm exterior, smiling awkwardly at the guests around me, but my mind was like a fast-forward movie reel, replaying painful memories of Mia, of Sophia's betrayal, and of the years I spent trying to hide the truth to protect the so-called family harmony. Sophia, resplendent in her sparkling gown, moved around the room like a queen, chatting animatedly with the guests. But every time her eyes landed on me, I felt a sharp sarcasm. She kept attacking me, her words wrapped in humor but full of malice. "Oh, my sister Emma, the great judge," she said loudly, loud enough for the whole table to hear, raising her champagne glass. "You're always busy with dry lawsuits. Surely you never have time to learn about family happiness?" She laughed, drawing a few forced laughs from the guests who didn't know the inside story. I clenched my glass of wine in my hand, trying to keep my face calm. Sophia's sarcastic words were not new, but today they were like knives cutting deeper into old wounds. I was used to being put down by her, being seen as a loner, ignorant of feelings. But what hurt me the most was that she didn't know, or pretended not to know, that I had sacrificed my whole life to protect her secret, to protect her daughter, Mia. Every word she said was a blatant denial of what I had done, the pain I had suffered. I took a deep breath, trying to contain the anger that was rising inside me. I didn't want to turn this party into a fight, didn't want to disappoint my parents again. But Sophia didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. She approached my table, poured herself another glass of champagne, her smile defiant. "Poor Emma," she said, a mock sigh. "You really don't know how to love your family. Always worrying about other people's business, about kids you don't know, but never about your own blood." And she emphasized the word blood, as if to remind me that I was missing something fundamental. Those words lit a fire in the gunpowder inside me. Don't you love your family? I've sacrificed everything, my career, my time, my future, to take care of Mia, to hide Sophia's secret, to maintain the perfect facade of this family. The anger burned, hot, making my hands shake under the table. I wanted to stand up, to scream that she had no right to say those words, that she didn't deserve to be Mia's mother. But I held back, because I knew that an impulsive action would only make things worse. At that moment, Daniel, who had been silently observing the party, suddenly stood up. He walked towards the family table, his sharp eyes never leaving me. The air in the restaurant seemed to thicken, the jazz music now just a faint sound in the distance. I sensed a change in the atmosphere, a premonition that something big was about to happen. My heart pounded, my chest felt tight. "Emma," Daniel said, his voice calm but with a sharp edge that caught both Sophia and my parents' attention. "I've been looking through some recent legal filings regarding my family." He paused, his eyes sweeping over Sophia, who was starting to pale. "There's some interesting information regarding a child protection case in Chicago 6 years ago. I think, Emma, it's time for you to tell the truth. Or would you like me to do it for you?" Daniel's words struck like a bolt of lightning in the middle of the restaurant. The already tense atmosphere froze. The chatter of the guests died down, and all eyes turned to me. Sophia looked at Daniel with utter horror, then turned to me, her eyes pleading with me to deny everything. My parents, sitting at the main table, looked confused and worried. My mother whispered something to my father, but I couldn't hear it. All I could feel was my own frantic heartbeat and the image of Mia in my mind. Wide, frightened eyes, in that shabby apartment 6 years ago. I was faced with an inevitable crossroads. Daniel's challenge had pushed me into a situation where I couldn't back down. I could continue to remain silent, protecting Sophia, protecting the family facade I had tried so hard to maintain for so many years. But that meant continuing to live in torment, continuing to let the pain of Mia gnaw at me every day. Or I could speak the truth, face the wrath of my family, but in return, I could be freed and have the chance to reclaim justice for Mia, for myself. I looked into Daniel's eyes. His gaze was not just challenging, but also encouraging, as if he knew everything and wanted me to be brave enough to face it. Mia's image appeared again, clearer than ever. Her innocent smile as we played, her sobbing as Sophia dragged her away. I knew I could no longer remain silent. It was time for the truth to be revealed. I took a deep breath and rose from my chair. The crystal chandeliers cast a shadow, making me feel as if I were standing before a judge, not as a judge, but as a witness, a victim. I will speak, I declared, my voice firm and resonant in the silence. Sophia shook her head, her lip trembling, but I didn't stop. This was the moment I took it all back. The truth, justice, and Mia. Daniel's challenge exploded like a bomb in the middle of the gilded spoon, shattering the false atmosphere of the anniversary party. The jazz music stopped, leaving only a stifling silence, heavy as a storm was waiting. All eyes were on me, from the curiosity of the guests to Sophia's panic and my parents' confusion. I stood up, feeling the crystal chandeliers shine down like needles, but I didn't flinch. It was time to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. I will, I declared, my voice calm but firm, echoing in the silence. I stepped into the middle of the room, my steps slow, as if I were entering a trial where I was both witness and defendant. Sophia shook her head, her lips trembling, her eyes begging me to stop. But I couldn't. Daniel nodded encouragingly, his eyes a reminder that I was not alone. My parents sat motionless, my mother clutching my father's hand, her face filled with worry. I took a deep breath, letting the memory guide me. 6 years ago, late one night, I began, my voice slow but powerful. I got a call from Sophia. Her voice was shaking, begging me to come to a slum in Chicago. I went, not knowing what to expect. I recounted every detail, leaving nothing out. The filthy apartment, the musty smell, and the image of Sophia emaciated, drowning in addiction, with bruises on her arms. But what shocked me most was a little girl, about 3 years old, huddled in the corner, her eyes wide and full of fear. It was Mia, Sophia's daughter. The room fell silent. I heard my mother gasp, but I didn't stop. I told her how Sophia had begged me to take Mia away, promising to quit and come back. I didn't want to do that, I said, my voice starting to shake. I'm a judge, a person of schedules and principles, not a mother. But looking into Mia's eyes, I couldn't leave her. I told her about the months I'd spent caring for Mia, the sleepless nights, the times I'd turned down promotions to spend time with her. I loved Mia, loved her more than life itself. She was the light of my life. Tears began to roll down my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. I wanted everyone to see my pain. But then, 9 months later, Sophia came back. She demanded Mia back, without giving me a chance to explain or convince her. She took her away, despite Mia's cries. And then she disappeared, taking Mia with her and cutting off all contact. I looked straight at Sophia, her eyes panicked, her face pale. I don't know where Mia is, if she's safe. For the past 6 years, I've lived in pain and emptiness, not knowing what I did wrong. The atmosphere in the restaurant became thick. A few guests began to whisper, their eyes filled with pity and surprise. My parents looked at me. My mother whispered, "Who is Mia?" in a trembling voice, and my father bowed his head, as if unable to bear the truth. But Sophia, as if cornered, suddenly stood up, knocking over the wine glass on the table. The sound of shattering glass was deafening. "You're lying," she shouted, her voice shrill, pointing at me. "You're jealous of me. You've always wanted to destroy my happiness. You've set this all up to embarrass me." Sophia's accusation was like a knife, but I didn't waver. "Jealous?" I replied, my voice cold. "I sacrificed everything to protect your daughter, to hide your secret. But what did you do? You abandoned Mia, never to return." Sophia backed away. Her eyes panicked, but she still tried to scream. "You want me to lose everything. You're jealous because I have Daniel, because I have a happy life." Daniel, still standing, shook his head. "Enough, Sophia," he said, his voice low but sharp. "Emma isn't lying. I saw the file. I know the truth." His words were a final blow, and Sophia collapsed into her chair, her face white. My mother burst into tears, repeating over and over, "Who is Mia? Who is she, Emma?" My father tried to reassure her, but his eyes were full of disappointment and confusion. I stood there, in the middle of the room, feeling a sense of relief like never before. Telling the truth, painful as it was, lifted a burden I had carried for 6 years, but it also came with the pain of facing Sophia's betrayal and my parents' disappointment. I felt more alone than ever, as if the whole world had turned its back on me. But when I looked into Daniel's eyes, I knew I had done the right thing. The image of Mia, her big, teary eyes as she was dragged away, appeared clearly in my mind. I knew this was not only the beginning of a legal battle to find Mia, but also a journey for me to seek justice for myself. The atmosphere in the restaurant was chaotic now. A few customers left, not wanting to be dragged into the family drama. Others whispered, their eyes filled with pity and curiosity. Sophia sat down, covering her face, not saying another word. My parents looked at me, their eyes filled with anger and pain. But I didn't care anymore. I had broken the false curtain of this family, and no matter what the consequences were, I would not regret it. I returned to my seat, my hands still shaking, but my heart lighter than ever. I knew the road ahead would be difficult. I would have to face Sophia, my parents, and the legal system to find Mia, but I was ready. I was no longer the resigned sister, no longer Sophia's protector. I was Emma Larson, a judge, a fighter for justice, and most of all, a mother at heart, ready to fight for Mia. After a chaotic evening at the Gilded Spoon, I returned to my apartment, physically exhausted but mentally liberated. The secret I had kept buried for 6 years was finally revealed, like a heavy stone lifted from my chest. But the release did not come easily. It came at a high price, an irreparable rift with my family, and open hostility from Sophia. I sat in my dark apartment, Chicago streetlights flickering through the windows, wondering if I had done the right thing or had just ignited a war that would never end. The next morning, my phone rang incessantly. My mother called, her voice trembling, full of blame and pain. "Emma, what have you done?" she said, her voice choking with sobs. "You've destroyed our family. Sophia is devastated, you know. How could you say those things in front of everyone?" She kept begging me to take back my words, calling it a misunderstanding in the heat of the moment. "Tell me you're wrong, Emma. My Sophia wouldn't do such a thing." My mother's blindness both hurt and angered me. She still chose to believe Sophia, still protected her, despite what I had told her, despite the truth being as clear as day. My dad stayed silent, as he often did when things got too heated. I called him, hoping he would at least listen, but he hung up after a few seconds without explanation. His silence was more painful than my mother's scolding. It was confirmation that I had done something wrong, that I was the one who had ruined the Larson family's image of perfection. I sat there, staring at the black screen of my phone, loneliness washing over me like a wave. Sophia, as I expected, did not sit still. She sent me a series of messages, each one like a sharp knife. "You will regret humiliating me in front of everyone," one message read. "You are jealous of my happiness, of Daniel, of everything I have. You set this up to destroy me." Her accusations did not surprise me, but they still made my heart ache. Sophia did not admit her mistakes, did not apologize for abandoning Mia, for betraying me. She only blamed, as she had done names since we were children. I read each message, but did not reply. I did not want to continue arguing with someone who had never faced the truth. In the midst of this emotional storm, Daniel showed up unexpectedly at my apartment that afternoon. He knocked on the door, his face stern, his eyes sharp, but not as cold as the night before. "Emma, I need to talk to you," he said, his voice low. I invited him in, my heart pounding with the feeling that he had important information. We sat down, and Daniel got straight to the point. "I did some more research on that child protection case in Chicago 6 years ago that I mentioned last night, but that's not the whole story." He paused, looking at me as if to make sure I was ready to listen. "Sophia, she abandoned Mia again." My heart stopped. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice trembling. Mia was abandoned? Where did you find her?" The questions came pouring out like a waterfall. the fear and hope mixing together so that I could barely breathe. Daniel nodded, pulling a file from his briefcase. After leaving Chicago with Ethan, Sophia placed Mia in foster care in Los Angeles under a false name. Then she left and never looked back. I tracked her down through financial records and information from a private investigator I hired a few months ago. Sophia has been receiving child support from Ethan for years, but not a single penny has been spent on Mia. She spends it on vacations, designer clothes, and her lavish lifestyle. The news hit me like a hammer. Pain and anger flared up, burning away all other emotions. Sophia had not only betrayed me by taking Mia, but also her own daughter. She had used Mia, my kindness, for her own selfish gain. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms, trying to contain my anger. Where is Mia? I asked, my voice hoarse. I don't know exactly, Daniel said, his voice low. But I have some leads on the foster system in Los Angeles. I can help you find her. He put his hand on my shoulder, his eyes sincere. Emma, you're not alone. I know what you've been through, and I'm on your side. Daniel's words were like a ray of light in the darkness. For the first time, I felt like I was no longer alone in this fight. But at the same time, the pain of knowing that Mia had been abandoned again tore me in two. I couldn't imagine what she must have been going through. The loneliness, the fear, the feeling of being abandoned by her own mother. I blamed myself for not doing more, for not holding on to Mia at all costs. We will find her, I said, my voice firm, and I will take custody of Mia. I will not let Sophia hurt her again. Daniel nodded, his eyes full of support. I knew the road ahead would be difficult. Sophia, with Ethan's backing, would not give up easily. And my parents, heartbroken as they were, might still stand by Sophia. But I no longer cared about keeping the peace. All my hesitation, all my concessions had vanished. There was only one goal: getting Mia back. I looked out the window, the lights of Chicago still twinkling in the night. The pain of losing Mia was still there, but now it had turned into a fire of determination. I was no longer the resigned sister, no longer Sophia's protector. I was Emma, a judge, a mother at heart, and I would fight to the end to protect Mia. Daniel's confirmation that Sophia had abandoned Mia again was like a knife to my heart, but at the same time, it lit a fire of determination that nothing could extinguish. I would find Mia no matter what. The pain of losing her 6 years ago had left me living in emptiness, but now I could not allow myself to sink into despair. I had Daniel, an unlikely ally, and a clear goal: to bring Mia back to me, to give her a real home. The search for Mia began immediately. Daniel, with his criminal justice background and extensive network of contacts, became an indispensable supporter. He contacted child welfare agencies in Los Angeles, where Sophia and Ethan had lived. But finding a child in the foster care system was not easy. Mia was registered under a false name, and social services had strict confidentiality rules to protect children. We had to navigate a complex web of red tape, from providing documentation proving my relationship with Mia to explaining the details of my time caring for her. Every day was a battle of waiting, of unanswered calls and emails that fell on deaf ears. I spent hours every night looking through old photos of Mia, pictures of her smiling brightly in the park or sleeping soundly in my arms. Every time I saw that smile, I reminded myself to be patient. Daniel, despite his busy schedule, made time to support me. He contacted private investigators, checked Sophia's financial records, and even reached out to people who knew her in Los Angeles. We'll find her, Emma, he said, his voice firm. I promise. After nearly 3 weeks of stress, a glimmer of hope finally appeared. A social worker in Los Angeles contacted us and confirmed that there was a girl matching Mia's description, living with a foster family outside the city. She was listed as Lily Thompson, but her age, appearance, and other details matched Mia's, leaving me breathless with excitement. I want to meet her, I said immediately, my voice shaking. The social worker agreed to arrange a meeting, but warned that Mia might have been through a lot of trauma, and that I needed to prepare myself. We flew to Los Angeles the next day, When I walked into the child protection office, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The small room with its gray walls and the faint smell of disinfectant felt claustrophobic. Mia sat in a chair, now 9 years old, thin and shy. Her brown hair was longer, but her big round eyes still had that lost look I'll never forget. She wore a loose sweater, her hands clasped together, her eyes fixed on me warily. I wanted to run and hug her, but Mia's distant gaze made me hesitate. "Hello, Mia," I said softly, kneeling down to her eye level. "I'm Emma. I've seen you before, a long time ago." Mia didn't respond, just bowed her head, her shoulders shaking. The social worker, a middle-aged woman with a soft voice, stood next to me, urging me to be patient. "She's been through a lot," she said. "It takes time to rebuild trust." I tried to talk about old memories, about the afternoons we spent playing with blocks, about the times I pushed Mia on the swings at the park, but Mia remained silent, her eyes blank. I felt my heart tighten, wondering if she even remembered me, or if the trauma had erased the memories of our time together. The social worker suggested I try something familiar, something that had once been a bridge between Mia and me. I thought, searching my memory, and then an idea struck me. "Mia," I began, my voice soft as if telling a fairy tale. "I remember when I used to tell you a story about a princess who got lost in an enchanted forest. She was very brave, and she had an aunt who loved her and searched everywhere." I paused, looking into Mia's eyes. Suddenly her eyes lit up, a small but clear light. Mia raised her head and whispered in a tiny voice, "Aunt Emma? The story of the Little Mermaid?" In that moment, I felt like the world stopped. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I held them back, smiling at Mia. "Yes, honey," I said, my voice breaking. "It's our story." It wasn't Anderson's The Little Mermaid, but a story I made up to comfort Mia every night when she cried for her mother. The glint in Mia's eyes was proof that our bond was still there, even if it had been obscured by time and pain. From that moment on, I began to approach Mia more gently. I did not force her to talk or open up right away. Instead, I spent time with her, playing simple games, reading books, or just sitting quietly when she needed it. I brought a picture book that Mia used to love, and every day I read to her. Speaking softly like the old days, gradually, Mia began to open up. She told me about her friends at school, about the sad days in her foster home, and sometimes she asked me about the mother who left. Each of her questions was a stab, but also an opportunity for me to heal the wounds for both of us. The conflict in my heart, the fear that Mia would not accept me, the fear that I could not heal her wounds, was gradually soothed by love and patience. I realized that rebuilding trust cannot be rushed. Every smile from Mia, every time she held my hand, was a small but meaningful step forward. I knew the journey would be long, but I believed that with love and sincerity, I could help Mia find safety and happiness again. When I left Los Angeles, I promised Mia that I would come back, that I would do everything I could to bring her back to live with me. She looked at me, her eyes no longer fearful but hopeful. "You won't leave me, will you?" she asked, her voice small but full of longing. "Never, Mia," I said, holding her close. It was a promise not just to Mia, but to myself. I would fight, not just to find Mia, but to give her the life she deserved. After that magical moment when Mia recognized me from the fairy tale, a new energy surged through me. Her shy smile, her eyes sparkling with hope, was all I needed to keep fighting. I knew that bringing Mia back to me was more than a personal desire. It was a mission. I had to protect her, make sure she never had to endure the pain of abandonment again. With Daniel's support, I began preparing for the legal battle for Mia's custody, a battle I knew would be challenging, not only because of Sophia, but also because of the team of sharp lawyers she could hire. We began developing our legal strategy as soon as we returned to Chicago. Daniel, with his extensive criminal law experience, became an indispensable guide. We identified two main pillars of our case: proving Sophia's negligence and neglect of Mia, and demonstrating the financial, emotional, and environmental stability I could provide for her. I began gathering every piece of evidence I could. Photos of Mia living with me, detailed logs of my caregiving, receipts for Mia's clothes, toys, and preschool tuition. I also prepared a detailed affidavit about the midnight phone call 6 years earlier, about Sophia's drug addiction, and how she had begged me to adopt Mia only to take her away without explanation. In addition, I provided documentation of my stability, income from my position as a judge, personal assets, and employment records that demonstrated that I was a responsible person capable of raising Mia in a safe and loving environment. Daniel assisted me in compiling a list of witnesses, including former neighbors in the slums where Sophia had lived who could testify to her deplorable condition. We also contacted the social worker in Los Angeles who had supervised my meetings with Mia to obtain testimony about her mental health and the relationship between her and her aunt. But Sophia is no easy opponent. With the backing of Ethan, a wealthy businessman, she hires one of the most prestigious attorneys in Los Angeles, Richard Caldwell, a sly fox in the legal world, known for turning around even seemingly unwinnable cases. Caldwell crafts the perfect story for Sophia, portraying her as a mother who has repented from her past mistakes. At preliminary meetings, Sophia appears elegant, lightly made up, and remorseful. She cries, talks about her arduous journey to recovery, and expresses her desire to make amends, to be Mia's mother. "I love her more than anything," she says, tears streaming down her face, her voice shaking. "I was wrong, but I've changed. Please give me a chance." Sophia's performance made me nervous. She was so perfect, and Caldwell knew how to play on the judge's emotions. I feared that her emotional testimony would sway the court, especially since Sophia was Mia's biological mother, an undeniable legal advantage. I sat in Daniel's office, reviewing the documents, feeling increasingly uneasy. "Are we strong enough to win?" I asked, my voice low. Daniel, who was looking through a file, looked up at me. "Emma, we don't just have evidence. We have facts." He pushed a stack of papers toward me, his eyes sharp. "I found this. This is the killer." They were bank statements and financial transactions that showed Sophia had been receiving child support from Ethan for years, even while Mia was in foster care. The money had been spent on luxury vacations, designer clothes, and all-night parties. Not a single penny had been spent on Mia's care. "This is proof that Sophia had no intention of being a mother," Daniel said. "She was just using Mia for her own gain." This evidence was like a ray of light in the darkness. It exposed Sophia's true colors, destroying the drama of repentance she had created. I felt a mixture of relief and determination. With these documents, we had a chance to not only win custody of Mia, but also expose Sophia's irresponsibility in court. But I also knew that this battle would not be easy. Caldwell would do everything to protect his client, and Sophia would not hesitate to use any means to save face. During the preparation, I realized a profound change in myself. I was no longer the sister who always gave in, always protecting Sophia no matter how hurt. I became a direct, uncompromising person, for Mia's sake. Every night, I sat by the window looking out at the sparkling lights of Chicago, thinking about Mia. I imagined her somewhere, perhaps waiting for me, believing that I would come to save her. That belief became the motivation for me to continue, regardless of the opposition from my family or the difficulties ahead. The conflict of family loyalty was gone. The duty to protect Mia had trumped the pressure to keep the peace. I knew that the upcoming trial would be more than a legal battle, but a human battle, a battle of truth. I was ready to face Sophia, Caldwell, and my parents' disappointed eyes. I looked at Mia's picture on the table, her innocent smile a reminder that I was doing the right thing. "I'll take you home," I whispered, clutching the picture. I would win this battle. On the day of the trial, I entered the courtroom with a heavy heart, but a spirit more determined than ever. The large room, with its dark wooden walls and dim light from the high windows, had a cold solemnity. The audience was packed. My parents sat in the front row, their faces haggard, their eyes filled with worry. Sophia, next to her lawyer, Richard Caldwell, looked elegant in a pale blue dress, but her eyes were strained, lacking her usual arrogance. Mia, ushered in by a social worker, sat in a separate area, her big eyes looking at me with a mixture of fear and hope. I smiled at her, hoping my gaze would bring her some comfort. When my name was called, I took a deep breath and stepped up to the witness stand. This wasn't just a custody trial, but a fight to reclaim the truth, to protect Mia, and to free myself from the burdens of the past. I had prepared myself, but emotions were still running high, causing my hands to shake slightly as I placed them on the Bible to take the oath. Daniel sat at the attorney's table, his gaze steady, a reminder that I wasn't alone. "Miss Emma Larson, do you have anything to say about this case?" asked the judge, a middle-aged man with a commanding voice. I looked straight at him, then at Sophia, whose eyes were filled with anger and a little fear. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice clear, though my heart was pounding. I began to tell her, detail by detail, leaving nothing out. 6 years ago, I got a call in the middle of the night from my sister Sophia, I said, my voice soft but firm. She begged me to come to a slum in Chicago. When I got there, I found her drugged, emaciated, covered in bruises. And there I found Sophia's daughter, Mia, a 3-year-old girl, huddled in a corner, scared and lost. I told her how I had adopted Mia, how I had sacrificed my career, my time, and my own dreams to care for her. I loved Mia like my own daughter. She was the light of my life, I said, my voice breaking at the memory. Then I got to the most painful part. But 9 months later, Sophia came back and asked for Mia back. I begged her to let her stay, but she wouldn't listen. She took Mia away despite her cries. And then she disappeared, taking Mia with her, and cut off all contact. I looked straight at the judge, tears streaming down my cheeks. I didn't know where Mia was or if she was safe until I found her abandoned in the foster system in Los Angeles, under a false name. I emphasized Sophia's irresponsibility, how she had used Mia for her own gain. Mia has been through so much, Your Honor. She needs a stable home. She needs genuine love. I want to be the one to provide it. When I finished, the courtroom fell silent. I could hear my mother sobbing softly from the audience. Sophia bowed her head, not daring to look at me. But then it was Attorney Caldwell's turn to stand. He, with his calm demeanor and smooth voice, began to paint a different picture. "Your Honor, my client, Sophia Larson, made mistakes in the past, but she has changed," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "She has recovered from her addictions, built a stable life, and now she wants to make amends with her daughter." Sophia, as if trained, began to cry, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I love Mia," she sobbed. "I made mistakes, but I want to be a mother. Please give me a chance." Sophia and Caldwell's act sounded convincing, especially to those who didn't know the truth. I felt a surge of anxiety, wondering if the judge would be swayed by the tears. But Daniel wouldn't let that happen. When it was his turn to question, he stood up, his eyes as sharp as knives. "Your Honor, if Sophia truly loved her daughter, why did she leave Mia in the foster system?" He presented evidence, bank statements, and financial transactions that Sophia had been receiving child support from Ethan for years, but had not spent a dime on Mia. "She spent it on designer clothes, luxury vacations, while Mia was in an orphanage," Daniel said, his voice hard. "How could a loving mother do that?" Sophia paled and tried to defend herself, but her testimony became confused and contradictory. "It was Ethan's money. It had nothing to do with Mia," she shouted, but her voice was weak and unconvincing. Caldwell tried to protest, but in the face of irrefutable evidence, he could only shake his head. Sophia's act completely collapsed. I sat there, feeling a mixture of fear and relief. Fear of facing Sophia's angry gaze, of facing my parents' disappointment. But also relief because I had finally stood up for Mia, for the truth. I looked over at Mia, who was clutching the social worker's hand, her eyes full of hope. I knew I had done the right thing. After hearing the testimony and reviewing the evidence, the judge called a recess for deliberation. Time passed slowly, each minute feeling like a century. I held Daniel's hand tightly, feeling his comfort. Finally, the judge returned, banged his gavel, and the room fell into absolute silence. "After careful consideration," he began, his voice echoing, "the court has reached its final decision. I held my breath, my heart pounding, waiting for the fateful verdict. The judge's gavel rang out, decisive and solemn, and the courtroom fell into a suffocating silence. I sat there, my heart pounding as if it were about to burst out of my chest, my eyes fixed on the judge. Daniel, sitting next to me, squeezed my hand under the table, a silent comfort but enough to make me feel their company. My parents in the audience looked haggard, my mother clutching my father's hand, her eyes filled with worry. Sophia, next to Attorney Caldwell, sat motionless, her eyes glazed over, as if she had given up all hope. Mia, in the children's section, looked at me with wide, frightened, hopeful eyes. I smiled at her, trying to convey comfort through my eyes, even as my heart was a storm of emotions. After carefully considering all the evidence and testimony, the judge began, his voice echoing through the room, each word etched into the air. The court finds that Sophia Larson was negligent and incapable of fulfilling her parental responsibilities to Mia Larson. The evidence shows that Sophia left the child in the Los Angeles foster care system under a false name and used child support funds for personal gain rather than to care for the child. I felt a breath of air escape from my chest, as if a heavy stone had been lifted. But I held my breath, waiting for the next words. The judge continued, his voice firmer. Based on the best interests of the child, the court has awarded sole custody of Mia Larson to Emma Larson. A sigh of relief escaped my lips. I couldn't help it. Daniel turned, a bright smile on his face, his eyes shining with joy and relief. I looked at Mia, who was smiling, her eyes glistening with tears, but this time they were happy tears. I held out my hand as if to tell her that everything would be okay. The judge continued. In addition, the court orders Ms. Sophia Larson to return all child support payments she received from Mr. Ethan to a special education fund for Mia. This fund will be managed by Ms. Emma Larson, ensuring her educational future. Sophia collapsed into her chair, her shoulders shaking, her head resting on Attorney Caldwell's hand. He shook his head, his expression helpless. My mother burst into tears, but this time, I sensed that it was not a cry of blame for me like before. It was the pain of a mother facing the harsh truth about her daughter. My father bowed his head, his shoulders shaking slightly as if unable to bear the shock. I knew that this verdict was not only a legal victory, but also a recognition of the sacrifices I had made, the pain I had endured. After the trial, Sophia was almost completely devastated. She did not argue, did not protest, just quietly left the courtroom, her eyes vacant. A few days later, I heard that she had moved to San Francisco, cutting off all contact with her family. Perhaps it was her way of avoiding the truth, avoiding responsibility and the consequences of her actions. I did not feel gloating or happy. There was only a vague sadness, not for Sophia, but for the sisterly relationship, however fragile, that had now been completely shattered. My parents, after the initial shock, began to make amends. My mother called, her voice weak, apologizing for blaming me, for not believing me. "Emma, I was wrong," she said, her voice choking. "I don't know what you've been through." My father, for the first time in years, called me too. "Emma, I'm sorry," he said, his voice low and strained. "I was wrong not to stand by you." While those apologies couldn't erase the hurt of the past, they were the first steps toward healing. I knew it would take time to rebuild trust, but at least the door was open. Mia and I started a new life. I bought a small house in the suburbs of Chicago with a lush garden and a large yard for Mia to run around in. The house was decorated in bright, sunny colors, a promise of a happy childhood for Mia. She gradually opened up, her smile returned to her lips. She started going to school, made friends, and joined the art classes she loved. Every evening, I sat with Mia, listening to her talk about her new friends, her drawings, and her simple dreams. Those moments were the most precious gifts to me. But our journey was not always easy. Mia still carried the psychological scars from the years of abandonment. There were nights when she woke up, crying out for mommy in her sleep, and I had to hold her tight, whispering that I would always be there. I took Mia to a psychologist, patiently helping her overcome her fears. Gradually, she became more confident, Her eyes no longer looked lost, but instead had the innocence of a loved child. The court's decision not only brought Mia back to me, but also helped me find myself. I no longer lived in Sophia's shadow, no longer yearned for recognition from my family. I am Emma Larson, a judge, a mother, and most of all, a person who has found happiness through love and responsibility. I realize that sometimes to build a real family, we must bravely break old illusions, face the pain to open up a new future. Every morning, when I see Mia running around the yard, I know I made the right decision. She is my light, my reason for fighting, and the family I have built for myself. The road ahead is still full of challenges, but I believe that with love and patience, we will overcome them all. Mia and I began a new chapter in our lives after the trial, where old wounds were healed and peaceful days began to blossom. The small house in the Chicago suburbs, with its lush garden full of wildflowers and spacious yard, became our true home. I chose this place not only for its quiet, but also because I wanted Mia to have the childhood I never had. A childhood filled with sunshine, laughter, and unconditional love. Every morning I woke up to the sound of birds chirping in the garden and the sight of Mia running around, her arms waving like a baby bird learning to fly. Her smile, bright and innocent, was proof that we were on the right track. Mia, now 9 years old, began to adjust to her new life. I enrolled her in a nearby elementary school, where she quickly made friends and loved art classes. Every afternoon, I sat with Mia, listening to her tell stories about her new paintings, about her best friend Sarah, or about her dream of becoming an artist. Those innocent stories warmed my heart, as if all the hardships I had experienced were worth it. I decorated Mia's room in pastel colors, hung her drawings on the walls, turning the room into a space filled with love and creativity. Every night I read to her, often fairy tales I used to tell her when she was little. Mia loved to lean her head on my shoulder, whispering innocent questions, and I realized that, to her, I was not just an aunt, but a real mother. But our journey was not always smooth. The psychological wounds from the years of abandonment were still there, hidden deep in Mia's soul. There were nights when she woke up, sobbing from nightmares, calling out "Mommy" in panic. I held her tightly, whispering that I would always be here, that she would never be abandoned again. I took Mia to see a psychologist, patiently helping her face her fears. Gradually, the nightmares became less frequent, and Mia began to smile more, her eyes no longer lost, but instead filled with trust and security. My relationship with my parents slowly healed, though it was never the same. After the court ruling, they were forced to confront the truth about Sophia. My mother began calling regularly, asking about Mia and me, sometimes bringing small gifts like homemade cookies or a sweater for Mia. I could hear the regret in her voice. "Emma, I was wrong not to believe you," she said during one visit, her eyes welling up with tears. "I don't know what you've been through." My father, though still quiet, began to show his concern in his own way. He sent short texts asking if I needed help, or sometimes just a simple, "I'm proud of you." These gestures, however small, were signs of healing, and I knew that, although the past could not be erased, we were working to rebuild trust. Sophia, after the trial, completely disappeared from our lives. I heard that she had moved to San Francisco, living a new life, not in contact with anyone in the family. I did not try to contact her, not because I hated her, but because I understood that Mia did not need a mother like Sophia. I chose to be the one to make up for everything she lacked, and it was a choice I have never regretted. As a judge, I became more impartial and compassionate. My experiences with Mia gave me a deep understanding of the pain of abandoned and abused children. In every case I handled, I put myself in the shoes of the children, ensuring that every decision was in the best interests of the child. My colleagues began to respect me not only for my fairness, but also for the empathy and compassion I brought to the courtroom. I know that my journey with Mia shaped me, made me a better judge, and a more complete person. My life, after so many storms, finally found peace. I no longer lived to seek recognition from my family, no longer haunted by the shadow of Sophia. I am Emma Larson, a judge, a mother, and someone who has found meaning in life through love and responsibility for Mia. Every day that passes, Mia and I build a new family together, not based on blood, but on choice and unconditional love.